Good afternoon, Mr. Kanoria.
Good
Welcome to
afternoon.
TiE Calcutta. Before I start off, I would like to give a brief introduction of Mr. Kanoria. And I'm sure he needs no introduction, but still, we would just go through the process. Uh, Mr. Sunil Kanoria is currently the Vice Chairman of Shrey Infrastructure Finance Limited. And from a humble beginning to being one of the at the helm of one of India's largest holistic infrastructure institutions, Mr. Kanoria has traveled the journey with integrity and determination as his core values. A follower of the teachings of Swami Vivekananda and the Vedanta philosophy, spirituality has defined his personal and work life from the very onset. He is a visionary who has correctly assessed the Indian economy's infrastructure needs at the beginning of his career and anticipated the imminent role of private sector in infrastructure creation. With foresight and an act for taking calculated risks, Mr. Kanoria has converted several pioneering ideas into business realities within the infrastructure domains, several of which were first of its kind, being Quipo, the country's largest infrastructure equipment rental company, etc. As the vice chairman of Shrey Group, uh, he has built a brand Shrey with considerable assets of over $6 billion under the company's management. Shrey is today a name synonymous with infrastructure in India. Today, Mr. Kanoria is one of India's most respectable thought leaders within the domain of infrastructure and finance, and he has had the distinction of serving ASSOCHAM, India's oldest and leading chamber of commerce. In addition, Mr. Kanoria is currently the Honorary Consul of Spain in Calcutta, is a former president of the Agri-Horticulture Society of India, and has served as member of the construction sector in the 10 5-year plan of the Planning Commission of the Government of India. Is a council member of ICI Institute nominated by the Government of India. With this, Mr. Kanoria, welcome you to this webinar.
Thank
you. So your initial thought, before I get into the actual topic, I would want you to just give us a brief of your journey, from being of developing the brand Shrey, and what were the challenges and what was the the highlights, so to speak, of your career.
Well, I started my journey quite early in business during my school days. From class 8 and 9, started to go to with my father, learning and supporting him in the office in the family business. Our family business at that point on was in flour mills and animal feed. And from class 11 onwards, I was managing a small business within the family. I did my chartered accountancy along with my graduation. I was able to complete my CA before my graduation at that point of time. And during my CA is when I came across one of my professors who was specializing in leasing business, leasing and hire purchase. And that's how the idea of Shrey came in. And we started in 1989, Shrey Finance as a leasing and hire purchase company. And what at that point of time in 89-90, India was just starting to open up. It had major challenges on infrastructure. And we started to tie up and try to focus on the infrastructure sector very early on. Construction equipment was our core focus because mechanization in India was not there at all those days. It was all manual labor. The markets was very negligible. And out of that, in 1991, the reform process in India started, and the journey of Shrey started to grow well. We got good support from the marketplace. In 1994, we were able to access investment from the government of Germany. In 96, from the World Bank Group, IFC Washington invested in us. And over the years, we got investment from the government of Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, Finland, Sweden, Canadian, Austrian, French. And that helped us to develop the infrastructure space in the country early on. We did the first toll road financing in 96, 97 when the National Highway Program started. We did the first power plant financing in way back in '96. And I got trained in infrastructure project financing in Washington under the World Bank Group. That helped us to get a lot more knowledge on the infrastructure space. They were our equity holders that point of time, and all these institutions, international institutions, really helped us to form what Shrey is today, and our learnings of the infrastructure space till date. There has been lots of ups and downs, but definitely it's been a great learning experience. And that's where Shrey is today. There's been a great learning journey, a lot of mistakes, but a lot of learnings and a lot of successes. And is in this journey, we have been always been innovative and tried to bring new solutions and new products, business models in the country, in the infra space. So the first equipment rental company in India was in 2001 as Cupo we created. The first telecom tower company in 2005 was created by us. And many more solutions in the infra is what we have developed. And that's been the journey. We have always believed is work with devotion as our key driver. And my parents, my father particularly, has groomed us with our philosophy and as our key driver and our learnings and teachings of Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda that has helped us in managing our life till today. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really a very inspiring resume, so to call it. Before, while hearing you, two things really struck me, and I think, personally, I would want to know your views, because you had started by saying that you were part of the family business. Now, how different it is a family business as compared to a professional business or any other business? Because I'm sure these two are two different things. Now, I would like to have your views. How different was it managing a family business and being part of family, and with whatever pulls and pressures of the family vis-a-vis a professionally run organization?
See, major difference in a family business is a continuity, a long-term perspective. If you see many countries, and India more particularly has had a very strong family business environment. Countries like Germany and all, if you go, Europe again is very strong in family business environments. So what is required is, as you grow as a family, you need to bring in structures. So the way I look at it is, a family business has the emotions but lacks the structure and the professionalism. A professional environment, entrepreneur, pure professional entrepreneur, lacks the emotion but has the strong structures and professionalism. If we can marry both these two, then it is the best combination. You get the best of both the worlds.
I think
So
that's really a learning, Mr. Kanoria. That's really a learning.
So therefore, you need
Yeah,
to
please.
bring both these two together. And what we have tried to do, and that is why what we did as a family, as we were growing, we created a foundation. And all our businesses are owned by the foundation. As individual family members, we don't own anything. We decided that because we as human beings will come on this earth and we'll go. But if institutions can continue beyond us and we leave behind a legacy of value creation, because you employ so many people, you've created an ecosystem. So that's what our attempt has been, and our effort and endeavor has been to work that out. And that's the reason why we created a foundation and put all the businesses there. We as trustees of the business, or we as managers of the foundation, is what we are adding help and trying to put structures of professionalism, which normally is missed in a family environment. It's not easy because it's emotions which you work with, and therefore you need to put those structures in place. Whenever you have a high level of emotion, then you start to bring in a better professional environment, and you are able to manage those emotions much better.
Thank you. And emanating from your basic introduction, there's another question which has been striking my mind as to how different an infrastructure business is as compared to the general so-called IT or a brick and mortar or any other kind of business. I mean, what differentiates an infrastructure business, and what is it special about an infrastructure project?
See, in an infrastructure project, the key thing is normally if you see globally, most countries have developed infrastructure that is a role of the government. Whether you take the most developed world, whether the US, whether Europe, whether Japan, everywhere, mostly the driver of infrastructure development is the role of the government. And why? Because you need a very long-term perspective. You need very deep pockets. You need the investment return. You cannot measure the return just pure financial return, because the return of creating a road to a society, to a community, or to a country is much more. The multiply effect of infrastructure in an economy is 20x plus. So say, for example, that is the reason why we say that if the government spends 1 lakh crore in infrastructure, it has a multiplied effect of 20 lakh crore in the economy. Because why it is so? Let's say, for example, if you create a road, you distribute wealth. That is a mechanism of distributing wealth while creating an asset which people use. So once you have a road, then people can communicate better, the communication improves, the mobility improves, and it can just escalate the volume of activity in the economy. And that is what has happened in India. If you see in the mid 90s till now. However, where the challenge of infrastructure comes in is two. One is the execution of the project. Till the project is not done, there is an execution risk. And the second is basically the project viability per se, in case there is a private investment required. India in the mid 90s, when Mr. Vajpayee, Atal Bihari Vajpayee was our prime minister, he opened up the national highway to private sector. And there was a model, and that's the time when I was a member of the planning commission during his time as in the infrastructure space, and we did a lot of work trying to see, because the government said we don't have that much of money. So if we don't have that much of money, how do I attract private sector? The problem which India has faced is that when you attract private investment, there will be a return they will be expecting, which will be much more, because the cost of capital for a private sector, the cost of risk is much higher than a government. And therefore, the problem, as you said, the infrastructure business is a completely different business. It needs to be understood well. And actually, if you really see, India has gone through a lot of pain in understanding this. In the last decade, we have made so many errors in our understanding this business, how it functions, that we have really brought in a lot of challenges in this space. And therefore, we saw a slow growth in the last almost 8 to 10 years in this space. The space of growth which was there in the 2000s, it slowed down in the last decade by private sector. The government started to increase their role because the private sector could not, because we could not differentiate or could not accept that how people can make profit on a road. So that as a society, we started to kind of resent profit making, thinking that profit making is a dirty word. Not realizing that because of that profit generation, we are able to attract capital which is required and build infrastructure. If you see the kind of airports which has happened, why it has happened? Some of the airports which has come up, Delhi, Mumbai, because we brought in private sector investment. We have opened it up to some extent. So it is important to understand what we want as a society, and then we look at infrastructure. And therefore, infrastructure as a business becomes very, very challenging. and most of people have failed in it.
It's really heartening to note that we are talking to one of the very few successful infrastructure entrepreneurs, as I can put it. Mr. Kanoria, now coming back to the topic of today's discussion. Basically, today's discussion is in two halves. One is the RBI policies and its impact on the current scenario, being COVID and post-COVID, and also how can businesses effectively strategize this. Now, but before coming into that, one final question. A few years back, even in your wildest dreams, have you ever thought about a situation like this, that we will be forced to stay indoors, and then possibly 30, 40, a particular percentage of work is still happening? It's not that nothing is happening. A particular percentage of work is still happening, possibly not the 100% that we are thinking of, but still in certain industries it is 80, in certain it's 30, 40, whatever. So what is your take on this, and where do we go forward with this? And then we can come to the RBI policies, etc.
I think what we are witnessing today, it is unprecedented. I think in world history, I have not read any history which has where the world at one go comes to a halt.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think I believe in the divine intervention. So I think this is some divine intervention, that energies. I believe that we are all made of energies. Our soul is just a bowl of energy, and it's like a hard disk, which basically keeps on absorbing whatever we put in that. And so therefore, the supreme energy all around us, that revolts, and that is what has revolted, and sending a message to the world that whatever impact we have done over the last many decades, and therefore it is a time for us to reboot ourselves, reset ourselves in terms of technology. When we find our computer doesn't work, we reboot it, and then it starts to function again on a better performance. So therefore, I think it's a time when we need to reboot ourselves. It's a message which has come to us, and I think we are very, very lucky. I think we are very, very lucky to get this opportunity in our lifetime, to be able to see and get this day and an opportunity to reboot ourselves. If we don't take this opportunity at this point of time, as an individual, as a society, and as an economy and a country, we will miss this bus.
So, in short, sir, can we say that this is basically an opportunity which which has been given to us to rethink ourselves, to rethink, to pause for a second, or pause for a period of time, and think where we are going with with our day-to-day running, and whatever, whether we are running towards meeting a particular objective, and how good the objective, or how effective the objective is. Can we take it in that spirit and restructure ourselves?
I think that is the reason why I said that we need to reset ourselves, reboot ourselves, review why are we here as an individual, review why are we here, what is the skills or strengths which I have created till now as a human being, what is that I can use it going forward for the betterment of the society and the environment, because that is what will give us satisfaction, that is what will give us that joy which we earn for. We are here in this life, there will be a journey, there will be ups and downs, there will be challenges. We cannot cut away our past fully, but we'll have to deal with the past in a very subjective manner, looking at what is required to be done, how do we address it, and that is where we need, in an economy like this, we need the government support to be able to help us and facilitate that transition. See, if you have a good doctor, then you are able to facilitate it better. If you have a poor doctor, you don't get a doctor, then what do? You'll keep trying experiments. You may fail, you may have delays and slow process, lot more pain. So it all depends upon how we get it. But at the individual level, I'm always an optimistic. I believe that if we work within our own self and create that ecosystem to reboot and think what can we do from now onwards, review whatever we may have with us, it becomes relatively simple then. It's not so complex. We only make our lives very complex. If you look at simply and solve problems simply, we will find it very easy to maneuver forward.
Very well said, sir. Now, coming back to the topic, the first we'll split it into two halves. First being the RBI policies. Uh, how effective do you think are the policies which have been announced by the RBI? I'm not getting into the policy vis-a-vis the repo rate changes and so on, because that is more of a macro level. Since we have attendees who are more in a micro level, what in your opinion would be the impact of these policies when to a person who is basically an MSME or a startup, who is kind of gotten into the first stage or the early stages of business cycle, as they call it?
See, unfortunately, from the RBI perspective, I think they have done till now, at least till date, very limited activities. I think the sense which I get is that they believe that we are still in the middle of the storm. So let the storm progress the more and try to decide, and then we will see what is the damage and then work out with solutions. So they have given some interim solution in terms of giving a 3 months moratorium on loan and interest payments, which is basically is going to expire in end of May. So that 3 months is almost over. What next? You're only postponing your problem. You're not solving a problem. It is not a sustainable solution. It is like someone has a cancer. You have given a little painkiller, which may last for a few hours, but it is not a solution. And therefore, I believe that the present activities and the policies which the RBI has come out with has a very limited, very limited scope. They brought in a lot of liquidity to the banking system, but did not solve the problem of the banking system, who is averse to risk taking. So therefore, they parked back the money to the bank, to the Reserve Bank. So you saw almost 9 lakh crores, 8.5 lakh crore going back to the RBI, central bank, as in cash. So liquidity is not a major challenge in the country at the moment. The challenge is our mindset. Challenge is our risk-taking ability. Challenge is our rules and regulations, which is basically hindering our growth. And I really like what our Prime Minister said 2 days back, 2 or 3 days back. I think on Wednesday, the Prime Minister, or Tuesday or Wednesday, the Prime Minister gave his speech. I think that man is a visionary, and he has laid down the right areas which, as the economy, we need to touch upon. If we look at the 4 L's, he talked about infrastructure, because that will be a key driver for the economy. Then he talked about the 4 L's: land, labor, liquidity, and laws. I was very impressed with his ability to understand what is required for the economy to again revive. India has a huge potential. India has a huge power. We are only ourselves crippled it through our rules, regulations, etc. If we unleash see, till the late 90s, we used to have the license Raj. Sorry, late 80s. I remember when initial days of my working life, early on, we had our flour mills, and even to put one machine, we had to go to Delhi to take an approval. So it was a license Raj. But if we look at in the last 10, more particularly last 10 years, we have come to a regulatory Raj. Every sector has a regulator and the way they have brought in controls in each business area, that it has crippled the growth of those businesses, the sectors in the economy. So it is very, very important taking this time of rebooting ourselves. India needs to reboot ourselves. And that is what the Prime Minister has said rightly. It is only to be seen, India is very poor in our implementation. Excellent in ideation, excellent in vision. But what is required going forward is how do we ensure that that vision is translated into an implementation? How our policymakers, our bureaucracy, our regulators, they take these things seriously and look at changing India for a different environment and potential which it has, and unlock that potential.
Referring to the Honorable Prime Minister's speech, where you mentioned that about him saying about the 4 Ls, if I am not mistaken and if my memory serves me right, I think this is what we have studied in economics when we were studying economics in class 11, 12, and graduation. You being from a BCom, I think we can relate to this. Is basically, the fundamentals of economics is what he touched upon. And you're correct in saying that this is basically what it is. If we have to reboot, regrow, and think about the future, these are the 4 major focus areas that we need to uh, get into. Now, regarding the RBI policy, you have talked about the 3-month moratorium which is expiring on 31st May. Now, there have been some criticisms in this regard, where people have been saying that, okay, 3-month moratorium, but by doing that 3-month moratorium, you are basically extending my tenure. If somebody has a tenure of 20, it's being extended to 26 or whatever may be the calculation, but it's in effect you're basically asking me to delay my payment, and at a bigger cost possibly, if I look into the overall picture of it. So how do you kind of address this issue? Is there any your
See,
thoughts on that?
yeah, we have been interacting a lot with with RBI and the government, and from associations, and from our side also we have sent a lot of representation. See, what is required is, what has this pandemic done? This has impacted a cash flow of an individual and of an enterprise completely. And we don't know when this evolution will change and what will be the impact. Different people will have different impact in its cash flow. So what is required is that if an individual or an enterprise has a debt, it needs a restructuring of the debt based on a potential future cash flow, which is there. And that is what we have asked RBI, that rather than giving this 3-month moratorium, it is important to change your guideline to allow a one-time restructuring of all the loans. They have done some, like they have allowed restructuring of loans to MSME loans up to a certain amount, up to 1 crore rupees. If the loan is there, you are allowed to restructure the banks without classifying as an NPA. So therefore, little bit of relief is there to people below 1 crore. But rest is having no kind of perspective. And it is always very natural that the cash flow gets impacted. So you just realign the cash flow. The second part is, as you said, that there will be many individuals or enterprises who may not be able to sustain the cash impact which has happened during this period of time. So there are 2 solutions which a country can do and which a government can do economically. One, at the individual level, a very poor strata of our society, they need to be compensated that cash, which the government is trying to do in some manner or the other. So that becomes important at the lower strata where they need their basic needs of life. So in order to bridge that gap which has happened due to this pandemic, I believe as a society, as an economy and a country, we need to support that. And we all will have to pay a certain price for that. Second is, to enterprises, there will be two situations. Many businesses will have no future post this, will become unviable. So they have to be allowed to die its natural death. You will not be able to save everyone. Whenever any natural calamity, anything happens, you can work out programs, you can work out mechanisms to reduce your risk, reduce the number of casualties with a proper solution, proper medication, proper treatment. So likewise in the economy also, you would have some enterprises who will not be able to withstand or will not be viable for the future. They would need to get closed down, new enterprises will evolve, people will continue to be there. So people would have to, and that is where when I said that businesses have to, people have to review themselves, what they are doing. So that's where people would have to do. Some businesses can become viable, but with a lag of time. And that is where the system, the policies, the rules and regulations to support as much as enterprises can revive and survive. Some initiatives have been taken by the finance minister in the last 1 or 2 days. I would say small, these are very small tricklings which has happened. I doubt whether most of these programs will be long-term sustainable. It may give a certain breather, most of it. A few may have a longer impact, but majority of it will be just a short-term support which will be there. But I think we need to come out with solutions and policies in a manner which makes it sustainable. And we hope this engagement with the industry, with associations, with trade bodies and the government must continue, so that we can share the perspective. There should be an open dialogue between both to basically get the views and the perspectives correctly put, so that the right policies and laws are made.
Sir, coming to one other aspect that you mentioned regarding the banks not lending and the money going back to Reserve Bank of India, I think, which most of us know, a huge amount has gone back. Now, in your opinion, why is the banks not lending? Is it because of the last few years, the growing NPAs and the taboo associated with it, and somewhere that some of the few of the banking so-called officers and management has been indicted or possibly have been are getting involved in that? Is that a reason, or is there any other reason for the banks not to lend?
See, there are two reasons, I would say. What has happened is that the banks have become very risk averse. Like, I'll tell you my perspective. I'm a lender for the last 30 years. The risk which I used to take in the 90s and the 2000, and now in the last 5 years, my risk perception has changed. I've become a lot more conservative. I see everywhere risk. So I basically also become cautious in my lending, and also my behavior has changed. Why? Because the rules and regulations have changed. Two parts to it. One, because the challenge, India as a country, we have not accepted that businesses can fail. We find that if a business fails, it is a person behind it. He's a promoter, he's an entrepreneur, he is crooked, and he should be put behind the bars. That attitude as a society is killing us a lot. We need to differentiate between business failures and a person committing a fraud. A person, if he commits a fraud, yes, there will be always there are systems and rules which will take care of that. But business failures need to be accepted as business failures. There could be many reasons, which we have stopped accepting that. And therefore, the banks have basically get a fear about the CBI, CVC, and the 3 C's are there.
ED, yeah, exactly.
So they get fear of that. Why am I going to take the risk? They are mostly the public sector banks. Even now, the private sector banks also. Everyone is at the same risk. That if I take a decision, something goes wrong, I'll be questioned. So therefore, people don't want to take a risk. So that is one key aspect. Second is the rules. Like, say for example, if there is a 30-day overdue or a 90-day overdue, I have to start making provision. So why do I lend? I have to classify as an NPA. If I classify as an NPA, I have to make provision. If I have to make provision, I don't have capital. I can't access capital. So my business will fail. So if in the 90s, this was not so. So I'll give my example that when I used to finance to a customer, most of our customers were small customers. They had no financial statement, nothing. And we used to provide him equipment and they have grown. They used to have defaults. So if there was a default and he has not paid on time, we used to talk to him, assess him. If we find he's a genuine person, he's not a fraud, then we used to give him time that, okay, fine, no problem. You pay me over a period, a little longer period. Instead of 3 years, you pay me in 4 years time. You'll pay me in 5 years time. We understood his problem and were able to support that. But today I'm not able to do it, because if I do it, I have to classify as an NPA and I have to make provision. And therefore the banking system also today finds itself into a fix. That what do you do? So they say, fine, I'm not going to support, I'm not going to lend. Easy way out. So it is the fault of our laws. And that is why I commend the Prime Minister when he said that the laws need to be reviewed, apart from the other 3 areas which he said. And it is very important that we look at our laws, adjust the laws to our current and our future requirement and environment. Not something which we bring from the world to showcase to the world that, oh wow, you see, I've adopted an American practice, or I've adapted a European practice, or I've adopted a Japanese practice. You have to adopt what is adaptable to India.
Yeah, I think we should now start making this concept of Indian practice as a global practice. Because
That's
India, somewhere, by listening to you, I'm getting the feeling that banks should get back into relationship banking, if I can use a word, which was there earlier. It has its own pros and cons. There's no, two questions about it. But relationship banking rather than a kind of a rule-based banking. Coming back to the banking, I want to spend a few more time. To all these entrepreneurs who are currently, there are two categories I can put it. One who already have a loan or a kind of a facility with the bank, and B, people who do not have. Now since the government has announced a lot of SOPs, mainly in terms of loans for MSMEs and related businesses, how do you think these companies should react, whether they should go in for loans or depending upon the business? That is definitely there. So what should be the general thought process of companies?
So I will put it into 2 buckets, as you rightly said. One, people who already have availed certain facilities from the banking community, whether banks or non-banks, and if they are MSMEs, then they can get a certain support from the banks and NBFCs if they are facing a cash crunch. So for different categories, the government has announced various programs in the last 2 days. It may take some time for it to get implemented, but that may help in temporary support to the MSME for some time. And therefore, I would urge the MSMEs to go to their banks and seek those support, giving their rationale, giving their business models, giving their revised cash viabilities and cash flow, and then working out a solution with the banks. So that is one aspect. For new borrowers who have not borrowed maybe in the past, but they would need cash, that is where, to my mind, it will be a slow process, because there the banks for at least some time will only focus on their clients. They will try to avoid taking new clients. for some time at least. So it will be not very easy. It will take, to my mind, next 6 months, because all the banks and all will start to review their practices, would want to understand what happens post COVID, what is the business and the economic impact of COVID, how businesses and different space segments of businesses are going to perform. We don't know. Most of the businesses don't know. If you ask a business who was operating, say for example, a restaurant who was operating in the past pretty well, tomorrow, how does he know? He doesn't know what will happen. When this pandemic will over, when the normalcy will happen, whether it will ever happen, whether his capacity will ever be used. So he will not be able to judge his cash flow itself. So therefore, for new borrowers, it's not going to be an easy task at the moment. For existing borrowers, there will be a certain leeway, certain support, which this some of the policy measures will help them to ease out for some time in the journey.
Now, Mr. Kanoria, I'm sorry to interrupt, but then, I would just want to interrupt here, because you see, as you said, that, it will be a call taken. Now, I'm sure over the last 2-3 months, 2 months, 2.5 months, most businesses has run up some liabilities, okay, because of the, their temporary downfall in business and their fixed commitments. Now, don't you think a lot of companies might use this and say, boss, abhi humko paisa mil raha hai, let me take it and then baad mein dekha jayega, and they fall into a bigger debt trap. So your thoughts on this, and how, companies can effectively address this issue, because there's an easy way out. The government has said, take loans, no issues. I will give you loans. Now, even businesses, if they are not very clear about their objective, about their sustainability, about their model, whether they need to change, it's very easy for them to fall into a bigger debt trap.
I agree. So that is the reason why. Let us now park this and let us come to what I was talking in the beginning at the individual level. See, there is a society, economy, and an individual level. We all start as individuals. A country is made of individuals. So we have to, as an individual, we have to look at ourselves and reboot ourselves. Many a time, we have, for business enterprises, we have to be not emotional about it. There will be certain businesses which will fail, which may not be viable going forward. So one would need to take a tough call on it, a non-emotional call, a commercial call, a professional call. And that is where one has to wear the professional hat and not just an entrepreneur hat. Because the entrepreneur is always driven by the gut in his belly.
Yeah.
So at that point of time, you have to wear your professional hat, understand where you are, look at, see the future. If you don't know your future at the moment, it is being difficult, then you need to buy some time. So for that time, yes, you are getting this certain support, you take it and give some time to evaluate yourself, I would say. We should not do a panic. We must not panic in these times. We must take care that if we find that we are not able to come to a conclusion at that moment, at this moment, just allow some time to go. Time is a big healer. Stay put, sit on whatever cash you may have, conserve cash, be frugal in your environment, and allow some time to pass. Buy some time till you are able to see some visibility going forward.
You are 100% correct, sir. One last question on this, the entrepreneurs addressing the loan thing. You see how important it is for these business entrepreneurs to keep their final credit rating, the CIBIL score, also in mind while taking any decision, because any miss here, it will have an impact on the CIBIL score, and which I'm sure will have a long drawn effect on the business or that person's credibility. So how do you think people or business can manage or get a balance between the two? Possibly this might be a repeat question, but then it's a very important thing.
It's a very important question you have raised, and unfortunately, as a country, we have tried to imbibe rules and policies which is prevalent in a developed world, and we follow that. And today, what has happened is a civil score is like if I am weak in that, then I become an untouchable in the financial world. So I think that is where we are going wrong. India is still a young country. India is not yet developed. And
Yes.
therefore, it is something like I always said, and I've said it even at one point of time to our Prime Minister in one occasion when I was able to meet him, that India is a child, is a young child. Say if you have a child of 10 years and you have a child of 30 years, you're not going to put the same rules for both of them. For a 30-year, you will behave and your rules will be different. And for a 10-year, your rules will be different. Unfortunately, what we have done in India is we have brought and trying to impose the rules which should be for a 30-year-old to a 10-year. So that 10-year guy is completely getting crushed under those rules. So he's got into a cage, he can't move. We need to let go that. We need to let go of our laws, the civil score and all. So this I'm giving as a, and this I have given a solution. I have suggested to abandon civil for some time. That is the recommendation there. However, whether that happens or not, that is not in our hands. We can only try to influence it and highlight to the government. But at the individual level, civil is an important score at this juncture. All entire financial community is forced to follow that. We are all forced to follow by the regulator. We have no choice. So therefore,
on a lighter side, sorry to interrupt you. On a lighter side, few years back, somebody told me that you better take a loan, because if you don't take a loan, you will not get a good CIBIL score. I mean, that is the kind of statement that people have told me. I mean, even if you are, risk averse or loan averse, they are saying take a loan, so you will get a CIBIL score. It will help. It might help in future. I mean, that has become so important in today's world for each and every individual.
It's become an identity. It has become an identity. You don't have a CIBIL score. What is a CIBIL score? That's the way it has started to function, which to my mind, it is against our Indian philosophy. And that is where I say that we need to adopt our Indian practices, what will work in India. We need to understand where India is. We have to allow our ecosystem to grow. We are not yet developed. So let us not try to bring in rules of the world, which has gone through those journeys. In the past, when they had grown, they didn't have those rules, so they could grow. Now they are bringing in rules when they have grown. So let us grow. Let us be free at the moment. We have brought in so much of change of rules and laws, maybe worse than what the British time was. I don't know. I didn't live those times, but maybe when you hear stories about so many stories during the freedom movement, I think this is a time. This is a rebooting where we need to get free of the laws which we have imposed on our people.
Okay, sir, it was very interesting, your thoughts on that. Now I'll turn to the next set of thing, which is use of technology for business continuity. Now I'm sure this is what we are doing currently, is a use of technology for business continuity, but then this is more in terms of getting the message across to people. But in terms of day-to-day businesses, how do you think, how much of technology will change? Because you see, a lot of people have been saying work from home, now it will become a concept. But for people like you who are into infrastructure, and for other businesses like typically your hospitality or the brick and mortar, as we can call it, work from home does not sync well. I mean, you cannot work from home. Yes, the IT and everything, yes. But how do you think technology will be used going forward? Will there be a huge change?
I think it's a massive change. I was just imagining that if this lockdown would have happened before all this technology and mobile came in, what would have happened to us?
That is $1 million question.
We
That's a
would have
million
been,
dollar question.
we would have been really living in the wilderness, isolated cave. of ours. So I think the way we have evolved and technology has been and will be a key driver in our lives going forward, and a lot more adaptability. Just the way when we had the demonetization, then the drive for technology and electronic payments came in. So we did not see the purpose of the demonetization was one, but it did not serve that purpose, but it served the purpose of transforming India overnight into a digital environment.
Into a digital.
So I think what businesses would have to do is has to embrace technology. It is a part and parcel. You are driving products and services through technology. So it is, you cannot do away with it now. It is an extension of our human mind now. Without the emotions, that's what technology is, with all the kinds of AI and things which are there. So I think we will have to work out a balance. There will be certain activities which would need a physical presence. There you will have to, and hopefully maybe 1 year time, maybe 6 months time, with vaccinations and all coming in, gradually that will come up. But I still believe that our behaviors of most of our people will change, more particularly the educated class. More particularly, I would say the people who have got that exposure, etc. Maybe the physical workers, they may still take time and to evolve, but because they are physical workers per se. But otherwise, I believe that our behavior will change, and a lot of our activities can be done using technology. And we therefore at all levels, at the individual level and at enterprises level, would need to work using technology. And I believe work from home can be possible in many activities. Like I'll share my example. In the last 2 months or so, we have not felt that we are not working. We are actually working more than the normal. It's been a lot more busy than the usual this thing. Yes, business per se is reduced because the customers have got impacted.
Yes.
So business from that perspective has got definitely impacted. But in terms of working effectively, I would say 60–70% the work performance has improved. Productivity
Yes,
has
definitely.
improved. The travel costs, travel time and all has come down.
Yeah. One related question, even though it might be far-fetched, but then which technology now being such a predominant feature going forward, don't you think the government should also start treating some parts of technology as an infrastructure project? And personally, would you be investing on an technology driven infrastructure, something which is creating, like possibly the government has announced somebody who can come out with an app like a Zoom, with more will be given 1 crore. So these are basically in my view a huge change in technology, which is more an infrastructure. So would you think that we can you or your organization can address this with the governments and make it definitely something worthwhile?
No, I agree with you, and that's what exactly we are doing. Just before this webinar, we have a business where we do technology into infrastructure. Our core focus is providing technology solutions into the infrastructure. So within the road sector, so we were working on a project, the National Highway Program, to basically manage the entire toll system in the country through command centers and completely without manpower at the site, and how still can be much more efficient using AI to track down traffic conditions, track down this thing. So that is in the road sector. But every sector of infra and in general, I believe technology is playing a role. The government is embracing in schools, colleges. I'll give an example. Like we run a underprivileged school in Calcutta, And we were surprised, even in the underprivileged school where we take care of the students, our teachers in the last 1 month have been doing classes online because students are not able to come to this thing and they are very poor children. But they've been able to get hang of a smartphone, and 50 to 60% of the students are able to access and learn online by our teachers. So I think technology will play a very important role. The government is open to that. Government is working on many projects trying to utilize technology. I think that is going to increase manyfold. So for technology company, business is strong. Even in our technology business in the last 1 month, we actually bagged more projects, even in the last 1.5 months. So we didn't have impact on our revenues as such.
I think that is the whole thing of a paradigm shift, if we can call, in businesses, which most businesses would need to identify and see how they can use technology better. So in that view, Shrey as a group, how have they used technology in this, and what is your group's vision of using technology in future?
I think in the last couple of years, we have brought in technology in many of our businesses. We have also have our own technology firm where we provide technology solutions and services. We have transformed our financing business on a technology platform. So we created iQpo. My son created iQpo as a technology platform for providing financing, online financing of equipments. So rather than doing offline, it's all online now. A customer can come on the platform. Multiple banks are there who can provide the lending, and a customer can get the financing completely online. So we have been transforming business. We have been trying to do a lot, and we will continue to do it a lot more.
Finally, because of this, shift to work from home, would you think it will have any impact on the real estate sector? Because one of the major investors in the real estate sector are the IT companies who create huge campuses and IT parks and so on and so forth. Would there be a shift there in terms of the changing? Because I believe TCS has said that they are planning to have a complete work from home policy. I think which is also followed by a few other companies, that they are planning a long term, not a temporary 3 months, 6 months, that they are thinking of permanent work from home, so to forth. So do you think there will be a major impact on the real estate?
I would say there will be some impact, no doubt, in the short to medium term. But one thing we must realize is that overall in India, our population is 1.3 billion people.
Yeah.
So our capacities are still not enough. There's a huge potential to grow. So maybe the percentage of growth will become lesser. Next some time there'll be a backlash because people will want to conserve cash and try to reduce everything because people don't know what the future would be. So therefore, in the short to medium term, there will be a contraction. But in the medium to long term, we'll start to see a steady growth. In case it would have been 10% growth, instead of 10, it may be a 5 to 6% growth. But I see is that at least for next 2 years, it will be slow.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kanoria. Now, before I wind up, I have one last question, so to speak, not related to this. You have created this brand called Shrey. If you can just enlighten, what does Shrey mean? SREI. Does it mean the Hindi version, or like how did this name came into play?
It's a Sanskrit word for Shrestha. Shrey is also credit. You give credit to someone. So Shrey is basically that also, and Shrey is Shrestha is the best. That's a connotation also. And basically, Shrey is also the name of goddess of wealth, Lakshmi.
Okay. Right. So I was always wondering what the Shrey, even though I was trying to link it with the meaning of giving honor to somebody. That's one of the meanings. So, but I just wanted to know how this brand came into being as Shrey. So that's it, Mr. Kanoria. Thank you so much for spending your valuable time, and hope we'll meet again, uh, definitely in future webinars. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. I want to thank all the participants and Mr. Sriram and Mr. Kanoria for the wonderful session. I would also like to thank our sponsors, Tata Teleservices, Kshitij.com, Diadem, Cashless Bazaar, 10 Downing Street, ICICI Bank, LinkedIn Local, and Head Start. And see you again in another session on 21st May. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Yeah.
And take care.
And stay safe all.